over the years I've discovered that sometimes rather than spending a bunch of money replacing parts when you have issues, it really helps just to clean things up, lubricate, add grease where it's needed, and sometimes that solves problems for a while. And in this case, I believe this is one of those situations. If you notice here, I get this wheel going, it stops pretty quickly, right? It doesn't freewheel like you would want it to, and kind of slows you down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart the hub, I'm going to pull off the cassette, I'm going to try to get inside the Freehub and lubricate everything, clean everything, put it back on, and see if that fixes the issue. Keep in mind this is a very specific hub. They're all kind of different. This is a Mavic Crossmax hub, so in this particular case, this is how it works. Others may be slightly different. All right, of course, the first step is to get this wheel off. So this is a quick release, so we just undid the quick release, pulled the wheel off. And of course, this is a multiple step process, and as you can see, we've got this quick release skewer we've got to get off. We've got the cassette that we've got to get off. Underneath the cassette is this thing called a Freehub body. We've got to get that off. And inside it all is this axle, right, that we want to pull out and get to the bearings. So there are quite a few steps involved, and let's go through them one at a time. All right, so you have your quick release rear wheel off, right? But you want to access some of the things within the hub and things like that. The only way you're going to get there is to remove the quick release skewer first. So normally this would involve unscrewing the lock nut and make sure you grab the spring so you don't lose it, and then put the spring back on in the correct orientation, reattach the nut that way so when you reassemble you know how things go. So you've got the quick release skewer off and you would like to remove the cassette. So how do we do that? You need a cassette removal tool and something called a chain whip, right? You need this chain whip because the cassette removal tool goes into the mechanism right here into the lock nut like that. And you need to be able to turn it that way to remove it, right? But the cassette rotates on the Freehub. So in order to hold that fast, you utilize this chain whip like this. You lay the dangling end of the chain on the chain whip onto one of the cogs, and then you lock that fixed portion of the chain onto the same cog, and that allows you to hold it fast. And then you simply unscrew the lock nut. Now this takes a lot of elbow grease, you know, but I loosened it, I kind of pre-loosened it so that it makes this easy. You're going to hear that noise. That's okay. Get it a little farther until you can hand loosen it, and there you have it. And the lock nut just comes right off. It's sitting on the cassette removal tool like that. There's your lock nut. And then your cassette just comes right off. You can take it off as a unit like this, right? And then set it aside. All right, so we've got the cassette off. Now you can see underneath the cassette, right? This is the Freehub body. And this is the thing that we want to get off. So that's got to come like this, off. But unfortunately, it's fastened on there by this. And to do that, we need to use 2 hex wrenches. This one is 5 millimeters, sorry. The other one's 15 millimeters, right? So this connects to a ratchet. You can use a regular 15 millimeter hex wrench. And the 5 millimeter goes in on this side like this. The 15 millimeter goes in on this side. Whoop, hold on, there's something in the way. It's a cap. You just pull that cap off. Give it a little tug, and that comes off. That's it. Pretty easy, right? But very not obvious, and it took me a while to figure that out. And this 15 millimeter hex fits right in there. It's, you know, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. This is threaded in a normal way. So I'm gonna loosen to the counterclockwise direction like this. And loosen and loosen and loosen until I'm just going to pull that off. Makes it easier for me just to do this by hand. Now it's loose, right? So I'll just continue to loosen until it comes all the way off. Get it to a point. And then what I mean by all the way off is I want to be able to pull this out. Okay, so now what we've got here is this little shaft now comes out, right? And you can kind of see that that's what was holding this Freehub body in place. So the next step is to simply pull that Freehub body off. Let's see if I can do it. Okay, there it is. There's the Freehub body. And you look inside, yeah, it's pretty clean. But one thing you can see that's kind of absent is oil. It doesn't look very lubricated, and that's why things were not rotating freely. Now, let's get into a little more detail here. So now I'm holding this up so you can see. Hopefully you can see there are these little guys. I'm going to use this wrench to point right in here called paws. See that little thing sticking out right there? And there's another one on the other side. And that's what makes the clicking sound as the wheel rotates. There's another one right there. So obviously those need to be lubricated, right? So we're going to put some oil on those. We're going to clean it just with a rag and be very gentle with it all. And then we're going to re-lubricate it and put the Freehub body back on. And hopefully that solves our issue. All right, to do a quick recap, these are all the parts that we removed. We've got the cassette over here with the cassette lock nut on top, right? We've got the Freehub body right here. We've got the washer that sits on the end of these bearings. Freehub body goes on over that like this, right? Then we've got the locking nut for the Freehub body, which eventually goes in like this. And we've got the axle right here that goes on the other side, on the non-drive side. Pulled that out. I cleaned the bearing inside, so we'll reassemble that. Pretty straightforward, right? Of course, this is the quick release right here, and this is the cap for the non-drive side. All right, so getting into that, let's put the Freehub body back on. Now to do that, you need to hold these paws in because the paws will keep the Freehub body from going back on. And before we do that, we need to make sure that we place the washer like this. So then we just squeeze the paws in just a little bit like that, and it goes right on, so no problem. Then we take the lock nut, reinsert the lock nut, start screwing things into place. And that's when we need our 15mm and our 5mm hex wrenches. Reinsert that. And I just screw everything back in place. So let's get that done. And it's in. To put the cassette back on, we're going to need some grease. What we want to do is apply some grease on the outside of the Freehub body, like this. Just brush it on. I'm using an old toothbrush, so never use the toothbrush for anything but grease after that. Take the thoroughly cleaned cassette, and you'll notice like there are reverse splines on here. They're all the same size. In this case, this is a SRAM cassette. but one of them is smaller. That's the key. So you look for the small spline on the Freehub body, and you can see right there, this one here is smaller than the others. So I'll just bring it closer so you can see. All right, so let's put that on. Line it up. Piece of cake. Everything on there. Done, right? And then you just take the remaining cogs. They're the same way. They're keyed. You just line them up. Stick them on. Put that on as well. That's keyed. And then you put the lock ring back on. Apply some grease onto the threads. Get your handy dandy lock ring tool, like so. Put it on there. Tighten that baby back down. You can definitely check the torque ratings out and do it to your liking. I'm not worried about it. I've been through this a few times already. I know it's not a big deal. You could put so much grease on, elbow grease on this. You'd have to be a professional weightlifter to overdo it, most likely, which I'm not. Okay, so that's on. Then we put the cap back on to the non-drive side. So this is the cap. There's the cap. Put the cap back onto the non-drive side. Just push it in. Boom. Done. There. Looking good. Put the quick release back in. The quick release lever goes on the non-drive side. So you just put it through like this. And you're in. Put the spring back on this side. This side. Looking good. So in theory we're done. So we can put it back on and see how it works. All right, here's the wheel ready to put on. Got the drive side lined up with the chain. We'll put the wheel on and see how it works. Big moment has arrived, so let's give this thing a spin and see how it does. Beautiful. Look at that. The intended result has been achieved.